We have a quick question here from Sergey, who says that he recently saw that Italy has issued some US dollar denominated bonds, and he wants to know how that works, how it's possible. So thanks for the question, Sergey. It's actually very common for governments and companies to issue bonds in foreign currencies. Remember that the main reason why they issue bonds in the first place is to bring in funds, to raise funds. So if a government or company needs funds, one of the ways for them to do that is by selling bonds, which is essentially just an IOU with some interest added to it. Now, sometimes governments or companies can issue bonds in different currencies, in foreign currencies, as in the case with Italy issuing dollar-denominated bonds. And they will do it for various reasons, actually. Various countries, as you know, will at any given time have different interest rates. And the spread between your own country's interest rate and that of another can create opportunities for you to possibly lower your funding costs for those bonds. But it's not only that. It's not only trying to lower your funding costs, it can actually also be used to create more demand for your bonds. So for example, when a government, and let's take Italy as per your question, when they want to raise funds, they obviously always want to make sure that they can do so at the lowest possible rate. So they have a cheaper debt repayments. Because remember, they are essentially creating debt by selling those bonds, and they will need to pay back those debt, those bonds, that debt that they make, and they would obviously want to do that at the cheapest possible rate that they can. So even though countries will issue foreign bonds to try and diversify their funding sources, it does come with a lot of risk for them because they need to deal with basically two-sided risks. On the one end, they need to deal with sudden changes in the foreign countries' rates or yields versus their own, and also massive changes in the exchange rate between that currency and the own. So for example, if the local currency, let's say in the case of Italy, the euro, depreciates substantially compared to that of the dollar, that means that the debt will become more and more expensive to pay back, and that can backfire on them. So to put the recent dollar-denominated issuance for Italy into perspective for you, for them, it wasn't really a way to diversify their risks, because it's actually a very risky endeavor for them, because even though the dollar is expected to depreciate going into 2021, and they will, of course, benefit from that in terms of their debt repayments. If there's any sudden massive shocks in the markets and that sees massive amounts of dollar demand coming back, that can really bite them on their repayments. Apart from that, right now, it's much cheaper for them to borrow in euros, to issue in euros than it is in dollars. So with those two things in mind, why on earth then would they look to borrow in dollars if it means that they're going to be possibly paying a lot more for that? Now, it comes back to the attractiveness of the bond to the bond buyer. So having it denominated in dollars makes it more attractive for investors, which means that they increase the demand of the bonds, and that makes sure that they can basically sell more bonds and raise more money. So for Italy, it's really a case of trying to make sure that they have oversubscribed bond sales, as opposed to trying to keep it in euros, and they might not raise the amount of money that they want to. Now, another recent example was that of China, right? So if you take China, they sold a lot of euro-denominated bonds in different tranches of 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years recently. But their reason for issuing in euros wasn't to make the bond more attractive, as in the case of Italy. Remember, Italy issued in dollars to make the bonds more attractive. But China's main purpose for issuing it in euros is because they want to try and capitalize on the extremely low borrowing costs that euro-denominated bonds can offer them. So think about it this way, right? Look on this page in terms of the actual yields. If you compare China's comparable bonds that are denominated in the Chinese yuan, that's currently sitting between, let's say, 3 and 3.5%. Now compare that with the average investment grade bond, euro bond, that's currently trading below 0.3%, right? So for China, it's not a way of making the bond more attractive. For them, it's really the sole purpose is trying to raise cash as cheap as they can. They're essentially borrowing money and paying back much less in their repayments because they're issuing it in euro instead of the Chinese yuan. So if they make that same issuance in the yuan, they're going to be paying in anything from 3%. And if they're issuing that in euro-denominated bonds, it's actually going to be much cheaper for them. And because they don't have the same type of default risk compared to a place like Italy, they usually get oversubscribed for the euro-denominated issuance. So it's really a win-win situation for a country like China right now to be issuing in something like the euro. So some countries can also sometimes issue slightly more complicated bonds that pays out the coupon and the principal in different currencies. So they will, for example, sell a bond that pays out a higher interest coupon, the coupon interest in a higher interest currency, in another denominated or foreign currency, and then they can have actually the principal set in their national currency. So that's a little bit more of a hybrid bond issuance, and that's a little bit more complicated. Not entirely sure how exactly those ones work. But Sergio, I hope that the answer has helped with your question, and any others, please don't hesitate to let us know.